as we enter into the sacred space of listening and receiving, I invite you to join me in this short induction ceremony in order to be fully open, receptive, and aligned with the information that is for your highest good in this conversation today. Begin by closing your eyes and taking a deep breath into the belly. And as you're breathing, bring your awareness into your heart center, making contact with the light in your heart. And find your heart light glowing, growing and expanding out around your chest. And now bring that light of your heart up through your crown center, through the top of the head, extending up all the way above you into central sun, making contact with the heart energy of central sun. And then bring that powerful energy down through the ethers into the crown of your head, down through your body, and into your heart center, expanding and joining with the light in your heart, and continuing down to the base of your spine, extending down all the way down into the center of the earth, making contact with the heart center of Mother Earth. And now bring that nurturing energy up through the layers of the earth, carrying liquid crystal plasma through roots up into the base of your spine, and then spreading into every cell of your body, moving into the heart center, joining with the light from above and joining with the light of your heart, creating a holy trinity of light within you, and then spreading out around you, holding space for your highest good, your highest awakening, and the opening to receive the divine downloads, encodements, activations, and light codes that are perfect for you at this time. Breathe that in deeply into your belly, allowing yourself to expand in this energy and opening to step in to the container of receiving. Welcome to the Alchemy of Ascension, Season 6, Exploring Expanded States of Consciousness. I'm your host, Waxéla Sananda, and today I'm so happy to have a returning guest, Amar. Welcome, Amar.
Hi, friend. How is it possible that it's season 6 already?
I know, right?
I'm super happy to be here. Thank you for having me back.
Yeah, I think you were on maybe season 2 or one of the early ones.
3, yeah.
3, yeah.
And that was when I was still going by Andrew. So people are confused. It's, Amar, formerly Andrew Martin. I still haven't decided on what the new last name is. I have some ideas, but for now it's just Amar.
Love it. And we'll maybe we can get into that a little bit in a little while here. But for starters, I would love for you to describe who you are and what you do in your own words.
Yeah, well, it's always been, I think the constant story I tell is it's always been a shifting definition, right? I think of like, what would I wear on my name tag if we were all just in a big room together? And I think really what I've come to is just seriously just a divine vessel. Like really, I'm just here to be a conduit. And whatever wants to move through me is really informed by what I'm engaging in, right? It's different when I'm out in the garden. It's one thing when I'm working with clients. It's a little different flavor when I'm having conversations like this. But I really see myself as just a vessel for spirit and for that life force energy. But what I do specifically in my practice is my job essentially is to help people remember. That's really what I've come to realize is I mean, I guess I'm a remembrance agent. I don't know, or a chaos agent. My job really is to kind of rattle people's cage a little bit and to ask some deep questions, really in service of helping them recall and remember the truth that they are the sovereign creator. And whether or not they're aware of that doesn't change the fact that it's true. And really, my ultimate goal is to help people remember how to free themselves and liberate themselves and to find that innate connection to the divine that we are, that everybody comes in with, right? So this is not something you have to buy. This isn't something you have to acquire. It's already in there. And my work really helps you recall that, to find it and to turn it back on. So really, in a nutshell, that's what I do.
I love that. Yeah. And you really are. You bring this presence that is so, like, what it feels like to me is totally non-judgmental and so present and simultaneously really easy to be with. I love that about you. And I always feel like I could just sit down and chat with you like we're old best friends. And
I feel the same way. And I think it's, if we want to look at it astrologically, that combination, I have a whole lot of earth and a whole lot of air in my chart and not much else. There's a little fire and a teeny drop of water. So really, I see my role is to take these very high level, airy concepts, lofty concepts of spirituality and what it means to be a master creator, and to make it practical, to give people the tools and the remembrance that they can start making these changes today. This isn't something that is down there in the road in the future. You can start it now.
yes, I love that. I love that about your work, and I feel passionate about that too. It's not about being intellectual,
Yeah.
which is a great segue into my first question for you. There is a Native American saying that is, the longest journey a man or woman or person will take is from the head to the heart.
Mm.
And you talk about that moving from the head to the heart, from intellect to emotion, intuition. And I would love to have you share about that in your own way.
Yeah, I mean, it came to me really through what I find the most powerful people who do this work. We could call it in the spiritual community if we want to qualify it that way. I think the most powerful thing we have is our own experience, and using that as an example of where we have been, where we have come, and what is possible on the other side of our experience. And for me, growing up in a small town in Wyoming in the middle of the, Rocky Mountains in the late 70s and 80s, my parents were both teachers. So for me, a very intellectual, learned, educated approach was very important. It was a premium in our household, and not to the extent of arts and music, because they're both musicians as well. So I grew up with the best of both worlds. It was an intellectual, sort of rigorous academic approach, which, by the way, I was a horrible student, much to the disappointment of my parents, I think. But there was also a very creative flow all of the time, and we were allowed to be creative. I was taking music lessons and art classes and was in theater. And so all of the humanities, basically, I was also a part of. But for me, it was always an intellectual understanding, because growing up the way that I did, being the being that I am, and coming in to cause a few ripples just by the nature of my beingness, that made a lot of people in small town Wyoming in the 80s uncomfortable. So for me, I was excluded. I was bullied. There's that whole story of being the outsider, and I was wanting to be on the inside. And for me, what that created was a very mental experience. I was always in my head. I was in that trauma response of always trying to gauge and predict and prevent and, find a way to intellectually make it through. And for me, being such a feeling being, it was often really painful to be in my feeling center in those places and in those spaces, because the pain of misunderstanding, I just didn't know why people didn't just, why aren't we just nice to each other? Why aren't we just kind and understanding? So I think what I did for a long time was shut off those feeling centers. I was never able to completely deny it or ignore it. I could only numb it or turn it down. But long story short, and fast forward to the past 10 years as I've been on this journey consciously, the realization that we need both. We need the head and the heart. And I would assert that if it doesn't come from the heart first, then it's somebody else's will, it's somebody else's idea and somebody else's agenda. And for me, what I see now as the limitations of an only intellectual approach, because that's the other thing, intellectual knowledge has been elevated to a place of supremacy in our society. And the intellect and intellectual, being right and being correct and having the facts has been elevated to a place of really the supreme way of being and knowing. And I completely reject that. I don't for a second ever suggest that we shouldn't have the intellect. It's a very important part of a much larger machine. But the limitation of the intellect is it only knows things historically. The intellect cannot know what's coming. It cannot know the future. It cannot know what's around the corner because it wasn't built to be. That's like trying to get your email from a calculator. It's just not the right tool for the job. So I think it's about realizing that the only reason the mind ever wants something is because what we think the emotional, energetic, or experiential payoff will be. So you're already going for an emotional payoff anyway. You want it because it makes you feel happy. It makes you feel successful. It makes you feel excited. It makes you feel loved. It makes you feel seen or included. So why are we using the calculator to try to get to the emotional or feeling experience? So what I have found, and we see this across the board, right? On our planet, we love to solve problems by bringing in the intellectual group. And let's look at the historical data and see what has happened. Well, all you're doing is drawing from a pool of information that already hasn't worked. So all we're doing is using the same broken solutions, cobbling them together as some sort of Frankenstein monster and trying to think that that's going to be the solution, and it's not. Everything starts with the heart first. The only reason we're doing something is because how we want to feel. And when you let that be the blueprint and the architect, then the intellect is an amazing tool to get it done. But it has to come from a deeper place first. And if we want to get really, really simple, the head is the masculine, the heart is the feminine, and everything is feminine first. So we're already living in a reality that is rooted in this feminine, intuitive feeling self. So to try to live at the exclusion of that, you're just chasing your tail.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, beautiful. I love how also this time I feel like is a correction of that heavy patriarchal intellect. Don't show your feelings, don't cry, don't, be vulnerable. And it's swinging back to it's more safe now to be in your feminine, to show your vulnerability, to open up emotionally, at least in certain circles, not everywhere, but
Yeah,
it feels
exactly.
like it's correcting globally or, culturally. There's a correction in place to the feminine and masculine coming back to balance, which is really what you're talking about.
Absolutely. And we can see expressions of, the feminine is the dark. She is the mystery. She is the void. And the masculine is the light. It is the piercing of the void. And it is the answer, right? It is the choice and the decision to do something. And in order to reach that childlike state, it's the pyramid, right? We have the equilateral triangle, which is the pyramid. And on the one hand, we have the feminine column. On the other hand, we have the masculine column. And those two create the base and its strength and its foundation and stability. And that opens up the third way, which is the child. So 1 and 1 equals 3. You can't have the childlike state, the childlike wonder, which is the eternal self, that always pure, uncorrupted, uncorruptible layer of self. But I cannot have the child unless I have my masculine and feminine in balance. And the child knows when you're not in balance, and the child will not descend until you are. So it's not something that we can do. We can't make it happen. It's not something we can resist. The child knows when it's time. And when it's time, we have no choice. Well, we do have a choice whether or not we listen to the call. But when that switch is flipped on, it is our duty then to come into balance with those masculine and feminine aspects in order to receive the purity of that grace. So I have just seen in my own life where I was constantly standing in my own way because I was adamant that I knew that the intellect was correct and that just doing it was the way to make it happen. Oh my God, how much time did I waste?
Perfect amount.
Yeah, exactly. Good answer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So on what you just said is you described perfectly the introduction meditation that I do for these.
Really?
You didn't get to hear it because it's pre-recorded, but it's first moving into the heart and connecting up to the central sun, which is the divine masculine, the source of light for, for this reality, and then bringing that down through the body into the heart, and then down into the center of the earth, which is the divine feminine, the core of the center of the earth, bringing that up and creating the holy trinity of light in the heart, birthing the divine child and
That's
presencing.
amazing.
Yeah, I know, right? You pretty much just described why we do that.
Yeah.
And I love that you talked about the pyramids, and how I've heard so many people say, in pyramid researchers, the pyramids are us. It's who we are. And I think in that, what you in reference to what you just presenced, it's the divine masculine, divine feminine, birthing that divine child within, and that is the Holy Trinity, and where the source of creation is.
So powerful. So powerful. Freddie Silva talks about the monoliths and the sacred sites on the planet. They're alive. They know you. They know your name. And when you are called to visit them, it's because they have something for you. And when you show up, they're giving you information. They're opening up remembrance, whether or not you're aware of it. You might just think you're a tourist at Stonehenge or Avebury or wherever, or the pyramids, but they are calling you there because they have something for you. So I think we're seeing slowly but surely the connections that are everywhere, right? It's a geometric experience. To me, that is the language of creation and reality, is geometry. So we know these shapes live within all of us. And I love that was your opening meditation, because it is that balancing of our aspects, our receiving and our sending, our allowing and our doing, that opens up the space for that child to really arrive.
Yes. So I love that you just present the geometries too. And I want to share something and ask you about that. A little over a year ago, I was at a women's retreat, and I had this spontaneous expansion experience where, while I was simultaneously in my body, it was like this projection from my heart center out, and also from my solar plexus. But there was this world, layers upon layers of geometry around me that extended out, we'll say, hundreds of feet, like really, really far. And I found that in this experience, I could enter into these geometries, these geometric patterns, and I could see where something was off or muddy or murky, and clean it in my vision. It was kind of like taking Windex and clearing out a space. And then I could see how that related to something immediately either in my body or in my field that was a misalignment, a distortion of some sort. And when you said that about the geometries, I'm like, yes, I've experienced that. So I would love for you to unpack a little bit more. How are we informed by the geometries from your perspective?
Yeah, well, it's a fascinating thing. And it's interesting that you say that you could see where there was something that needed to be cleaned or shifted or corrected, right? And I mean correct not as in right or wrong, but when you're talking about angles, there's a correctness to it. Like 45 degrees is 45 degrees, and it's not a kind of 45-degree angle. It either is or isn't. So we talk about precision and correctness from that perspective. And everything is geometry, right? We know the flow of energy that moves through our body is the torus. The toroidal field is everywhere in nature. And it's interesting that you said that you could see it, because when I'm working with someone, I can see it in their field where there is, it's what I call it like a bruise or a dent. I can see where the geometry has been impacted or it's a little wobbly. And it's a very, very amazing thing to be able to go into that space. And while we're working on the geometry, emotional stuff may be coming up, or memories or thoughts may be moving through them. And without fail, it is always they're a part of each other. And for myself, my relationship with geometry started when I was a kid, right? The only math that I was ever good at, the only math that I didn't just fail miserably at, was geometry, because it is a combination of the masculine and the feminine. It is the shape and the structure and the visual aspect of it, but there's a creation aspect to it. It requires masculine and feminine to be both it's like a painting, right? And when you're painting and you're doing really well and you're in the flow, it's because you're in that balanced state. And geometry is everywhere. It is the building blocks of all of creation. The platonic solids are within everything. And I see, we can look at the Vesica Piscis, right? When we have the two circles, it's the Venn diagram, the overlapping circles, the masculine and the feminine, and it creates the portal. That's where the child enters. And for me, a big awakening, because, you know, this journey is just a process of awakenings, right? There's not just one and then you're done. And last year, for probably 3 or 4 months, my meditation was just doing sacred geometry. I had a compass, I had a ruler, and I had geometric shapes, and I was doing the flower of life, and I was doing, you know, the seed of life, and I was just doing any sort of but doing sacred geometry every single day. It unlocked something in me. I could feel it as I was drawing these shapes and copying these patterns, and I would go into these spaces where I would come out and be like, oh my gosh, that was just 45 minutes that went by like that. So intuitively, we know this. Our body responds to it. Whether or not we are aware of it, our beingness sees that and connects with it. So I see everything as geometry. And I see that where we are in terms of our expression, that is the key. And the unified field. So our masculine expression, our choice of being and doing and living, is that masculine expression that penetrates the feminine unified field that we all exist within. But you can't unlock the lock if you don't have the right key. So if I'm projecting anger and frustration and victimhood, those are the only locks I'm going to be able to open. And energy just is. It is not good or bad. It doesn't reject or accept. It's just present. So energy serves. It is built to serve. So energy can only respond to you. It has to mirror what you're doing. It's an echo chamber. It cannot be what you are not. So we hear this all the time. If you want something, you have to find a claim it first. If you want joy, you have to find a way to become joyful. If you want, you know, excitement, you have to find a way to manifest that first, because that's the message you're sending out there. So your key to unlock lives within. And we've been taught it's the other way around. We've been taught we have to wait for these things to come for us, and we have to sit and just, oh my God, when am I going to meet my husband? When am I going to have the job? When am I going to find my money? Well, it starts in here. It's not that you're excluded from it. You just can't have something that you can't vibrate at the frequency of. Yeah. So for me, it's all geometry. It's nothing but geometry. That's how I see it.
It's geometry as an expanded state of consciousness, really, which is also, I think, what's your take on crop circles? Didn't plan to ask you this, but like, have you ever been to one?
Actually, there's a book by Freddie Silva I'm reading right now called Secrets in the Field, and it's a fascinating study. You know, he has firsthand. I love Freddie Silva because he does the beautiful job of bringing in the masculine and the feminine. He incorporates the facts and the evidence, and then he also speaks to the intuitive and the knowing and the sense of feeling, and it's so powerful, his approach. But Secrets in the Field is his book about crop circles and the exhaustive study that he did in all over the world, but really focused in the UK, especially in areas in England where a lot of them were showing up. And those are all keys. Those are all keys. Every single one has a message. And they started to really dig deeper into the shapes and realize, like, oh my gosh, this is the Mandelbrot sequence. Like, one of them is one of the most popular or one of the most famous fractal shapes. It is impossible for a human to recreate them. The precision that needs to be there for a legit crop circle, no human has been able to recreate to this point. There's always a little wobble where you can tell the geometry's off, the angle isn't right. So I think that geometry in the crop circles is, we're just speaking the universal language. Whoever it is, these energies that are creating this, they're just trying to get our attention. They're trying to let us know, hey, we're you and you are us. We speak the same language. And this is where we connect through geometry. And geometry is in music. Geometry is in art. It is in color. Everything has a frequency. And if you can find the frequency, you can measure the frequency. So if it's measurable, there's geometry there. So you can't escape it. It's at the foundation of humanity. Even the beginning is just the dividing of two cells, right? That's the vesica piscis. That's where I perceive that the soul enters the body, is when the cells first divide the first time and that little opening is present. That is where I believe that life begins. And so I think it's just when you start to dig in to this geometric nature of things, it's a freaking rabbit hole that you could just spend days, infinite time in there. And once you see it, you'll see it everywhere.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. It's a lot of fun. I love that you're drawing the geometries, and it really is a communication. I feel like my experience has been too that it's an Andromedan way of expressing is geometry. Whenever Andromedans, I don't know how much of this kind of stuff you do, but whenever Andromedan energies come to me, they come in geometries, sacred form. And that's how I experience them. Even like the Sri Yantra and things, it feels Andromedan to me.
I agree. Yeah. And my team, the lighted ones, Freddie Silva speaks to them as the shining ones, and you can find them. I can't remember the Egyptian name for them, but they're Andromedan by, you know, their root is in Andromedan, and you see that nature. You know, I'm a big flower nut and I'm growing flowers and vegetables, and I mean, I'm looking out on my gardens right now and they're going insane, but you see that sacred geometry everywhere. The Fibonacci sequence, the golden mean, the divine spiral, it's present in every single flower head. Take a picture of a sunflower and it, you know, that center, the eye of the sunflower, it's exactly that. So you can't escape it, and that's not coincidental.
Yeah.
There's no way that can be coincidental. It's mathematically impossible for it to be coincidental. So it's everywhere. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. You know, it's that old saying, you know, only for those who have eyes to see. And that's what it is. Once you wipe that amnesia from your eyes, then you begin to see like, oh my God, it is everywhere.
Yeah. Yeah. Truly. The codes that this reality is created from.
Yeah.
Yes. So moving forward, I also love that you talked about, you know, generating a feeling. We can't really create anything if we can't feel it first. And there's, you know, I'm a big Dr. Joe Dispenza you know, groupie, if you want to call it that. I'm going to another one the end of this month. But one of the things that he teaches is you learn to generate the feeling of gratitude basically on demand. When I first started that many years ago, I was like, well, how do you just generate a feeling of gratitude like that? And the thing that's cool is you actually can learn to do that. You find something that you're grateful for, you dig in, you feel it, you experience it. So there are these practices that allow, and for anyone that's, you know, listening that heard you say, well, you got to come up with the emotion first, they might be like, how do you do that? Do you have some like practical practices to help people do that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the first one is that we have to be willing to feel everything. We often fall into this trap of, you know, get into the vortex, love and light, find the joy, find the happiness. And joy is a beautiful state, but it's also very elevated and very activated. I think if you were in a state of joy all of the time, you'd have adrenal fatigue in about 2 weeks. So we're not designed to always be in one state. And I perceive that love, unconditional love, is a neutral state. It is just being in unconditionality with everything that is. So I think the first thing is we have to acknowledge that we have to be able to feel it. The good, the bad, the crunchy, the ugly, the beautiful, the bright, all of it. You have to allow yourself to sit with it, to feel it. And you don't have to claim it. You can feel the feeling without becoming the emotion. And so I think that one of the first things is we have to be willing to get in there and feel. And one of the most, I think, most effective ways to do that is finding a practice that allows you to silence the mind, whether that's meditation, whether that's Qigong or yoga, or just being out in nature, something that allows you to drop into here so that you can then observe the mind. It's impossible to observe what's happening mentally when you're in there. So find the state of stillness and silence that always exists in what I call the inner temple down in here. And then you can observe, oh, there's that memory about that horrible thing that happened. Oh, there's that memory about that joyful thing there. So you just watch these emotional states moving in and out. So, and what this does for you is then when you are in a state where perhaps you are triggered emotionally, it gives you the remembrance of like, okay, I can allow this to move through me. I can allow myself to feel this without it running away with me like a pack of wild horses dragging me behind them. So this is why we call it a practice. You do it every day so that by the time you really need it, you already know how to do it. This is why performers rehearse and athletes practice, so that by the time it's game day and opening night, I already know what to do. I don't have to think about it or worry about it. So that's the first thing, is you've got to find some ways to include stillness in your day for at least 3 minutes. Even if you just sit and you breathe and you remember the breath, and the mind goes away, no, come back to the breath. And the mind goes away, no, come back to the breath, and just learn how to breathe. Because the one thing you can always trust is your breath. Your breath will never steer you wrong. And if you're not sure what's going on, pay attention. Am I breathing up here or am I down in the gut? So that's the first thing, is find stillness. And then remember that the only reason you want something is because what that emotional, energetic, or experiential payoff will be. So rather than chasing the outcome, become clear. Well, I want more joy in my life, so I'm going to start doing the things that bring me joy. Is it a nap? Is it baking? Is it yummy food? Is it playing with your kids? Is it drawing? Is it just being in the stillness and silence, taking a bath, getting a massage? Anything that you can do to begin to activate that state now. And start with the easy stuff. Start with the stuff that you already know brings joy. And then remember that. Memorize it. Okay, when I'm in joy, my shoulders are back, my chest is open, I feel at ease, I'm in my body. So start to pay attention to what happens physically when you're in any emotional state. And then you will begin to map. Oh, I see, when my shoulders are up here, even if I'm not aware of it, there's something in me that's activated that's making me feel unsafe or defensive. So you just have to start getting really, really curious. You have to become like Indiana Jones for your own stuff and really getting in there. And I think that we have been taught to avoid our emotions, be afraid of our emotions, numb out. And how often do we hear that? Oh, you're so emotional. Oh, you're so dramatic. You're so over the top. Well, maybe, or maybe I've just never been able to feel before. And so when it comes up, I don't know what to do and it runs away with me. So this is the truth. If it's happening in your body, you have dominion over it. So if there's an emotional state active within you, you can change that. What I have learned is that feeling is the feeling. Anger, sadness, joy. Oh, there it is. Emotion is a story about the feeling. And emotion is when I'm taking the feeling personally. I think it means something about me. So you just have to start to get curious about where you're taking things personally that really have nothing to do with you. Life is going to live you one way or the other. So you just have to start getting really curious about what your role is. And you have power over it. You have control over it. You are the authority. You are the sovereign. So don't be afraid of what's happening in the body. And if you don't know how to handle it, find someone to talk to. Go to a therapist. Learn coping skills. Find someone who can work with you, who can give you a few reminders and pointers of how to navigate your way through these emotional states. But it's nothing to be afraid of. That's the lie.
Yeah.
That's the lie.
Yeah. Beautiful. I love the way you broke that down and presenced how important it is to feel everything that we're feeling. It is the pushing away, the not wanting to feel, that actually it uses up our energy and keeps us in some of those negative states.
Yeah.
So we've got to be able to feel all of it and then choose appropriately.
And, one of my favorite exercises, if people want something practical, this is great for blowing off anxiety or fear. If you're finding yourself in a constant state of fear and anxiety, which I know a lot of us on the planet have been feeling, especially over the past couple of years, it's my favorite exercise. I call it, what's the worst that can happen? I set a timer on my phone for 15 minutes. I imagine that I'm taking my little fear monger, my little, worry wart, and I'm putting him in my lap. And I'm saying to him, okay, baby, for the next 15 minutes, I am your eyes, your ears, your expression. Tell me, what has you so upset? What is the worst that can happen? Push play on the timer and then write for 15 minutes. Do not stop. I don't care if it's gibberish, just write. Using that prompt, what's the worst that can happen? When the timer goes off, you say, thank you, honey. Thank you so much for your time today. We're done. You set it aside. Now, when you go out throughout your day and you feel the fear rising back up, pull the little one close and say, no, honey, remember, we already did that. You got your 15 minutes this morning. Now we're going to try to see, what is life like if I'm not always worried? So you have to show yourself that you're in charge. You have to show this, immature part of you, this underdeveloped part of you, that it's okay to feel what you're feeling, but it also doesn't mean that you have to be in that constant state. So sometimes you do it once in the morning and once at night, and you can say that to yourself. It's really active. You say, okay, honey, I get it. We need more time. So we'll do it again tonight. But for now, we're at the store. For now, we're taking a nap. So it's like potty training a puppy. You just have to do it as many times as it takes for the puppy to realize, oh, this is where I go to the bathroom. It's the same thing. You just have to lovingly recenter yourself. Nope, we did it this morning. Nope, we already did it. Nope, we're not going back there. And you just have to do it because you've already learned how to be anxious. You weren't born anxious. That's a learned way of being. So you can unlearn it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, beautiful. Oh, I like that. It's really interesting. 15 minutes sounds like a long time,
It does.
but maybe that's what it takes in the beginning,
Yeah.
especially.
Yeah. Yeah.
um, I want to move forward into, and this is only if you're willing, you talked in the beginning about you've had a name change recently, or at least since the last time you've been on. And I usually there's a reason, people don't just go to work to change their name and tell everyone to call them this for no reason. So I'd love to hear about your story and your purpose behind
Yeah.
choosing or taking this new name on.
It was again, it was one of those things that just kind of arrived. Amar was the name of what I could call my innate self, my true self. That was the name that I was given back in 2014, 2015. And to be perfectly honest, at that time, I knew, oh, I'm going to make a claim for this. At some point, this is what I'm going to change my name to. And then in my typical fashion, I spent the next 5 years denying it and pretending it didn't happen and that it wasn't going to happen, because for me, it was a bridge too far. It felt so woo-woo. Back then, at that time, when I was still so new to my journey and who I really was, it felt like a silly thing. It just was something that I felt was indulgent, and I was so judgmental of other people when I would see them having changed their name, and it just didn't make sense to me. Fast forward to, it's been probably the past year and a half that I really started to see what it meant. For me, it was an understanding of the identity that I have claimed and the truth of who and what I really am, and allowing myself to not just know that, but to live it, to embody it. And Andrew is an incredible, amazing, wonderful chapter in a much larger story. Andrew also came with a lot of projections and expectations from other people about who I was that were no longer true for me. And so it began as an intellectual process, right? It began as like, oh my God, what do I have to do? And like, you're looking, and it's not a legal name change yet. So that's where I started, right? I think like most people, really looking into what is the meaning behind it, what happens. But the breaking point, or the turning point for me, was about a year and a half ago. I was just sitting down watching a movie, and there was something that it was The Fifth Element. And there's this scene where Mila Jovovich says to Bruce Willis, "You humans destroy everything you love. You destroy everything that's beautiful," is essentially what she was saying. And something within me rose up and was like, no, that is absolutely not true. We have been trained to do that. We have been programmed to do that, but we are not destructive by nature. And it was the weirdest thing, because it was like a voice rose up within me, and I'm not unaccustomed to things rising up within me out of nowhere, but it was different. So then I was brushing my teeth and getting ready to go to bed, and all of a sudden I was just overwhelmed with this full body ecstasy. And I used to do a lot of partying back in my 20s and early 30s in my rave days in Seattle in the 90s, so I know what ecstasy literally feels like, chemical and otherwise. And it was so strong and so powerful that I couldn't stand up. Like, I laid down on the bed because it overtook me, and I pierced the veil. Suddenly, I had received my full spiritual self, was home. The child had descended, had arrived. And I suddenly was like, oh my God, I have a body, and I have, like, what is this? It was the weirdest thing. And I was afraid to look in the mirror because I didn't know what I was going to see, because it was such a strange experience, totally otherworldly. And then it settled and it kind of calmed down. And then there was just this remembrance. I came back because I loved humans so much. I wanted to come back one more time to help them remember how to liberate themselves. And it was just the most natural thing. At that time, it made perfect sense. It was like, what'd you do? Oh, I had a sandwich. Oh, received my, ascended self and changed my name. Like, it was just at that moment, such a logical next step for me to do this. And so then at that point, it was very clear to me that I was being called to embrace a larger identity, that I was being called to see myself as a much larger being than just the limited experience of Andrew. So once again, the only choice I had was, what am I going to do about it? It was already there. It was unmistakable, and I could not ignore it. So that's when I slowly started moving into it. And I had already been talking with friends about, like, I think this change is going to happen, but I don't know. I don't want to, and also having to eat all of the judgment that I had cast upon others way back when, and that's part of it too, is realizing how silly and unaware I was at that point in my life. So it was really just an evolution, but there was a turning point and it was very profound and unignorable.
Mm. Yeah, yeah. I love that you shared that, how there's this opening to receive more of yourself. And Amar would be called your tonal name in the, if you want to call it the spiritual glossary or whatever.
Yeah.
Just like Waxela is my spirit, my tonal name that I received in a very different, but what's similar about it is that I knew that in taking on my spiritual name, I was also committing to my purpose, my path, and my purpose. Like you said, you realized why you were here. Oh, yeah, I'm here to serve humanity in this way. And it is this, I think we have to expand to a certain state um, in order to receive that and remember that and know that. And then it's up to us to claim it or reject it or say, okay, maybe later, I'm not ready yet, or let's go.
Yeah, totally. And that's the beauty of it. We live in this free will experience. So you get to decide how you respond to life as it moves through you. And it's certainly not saying that you have to, you're not bad at being spiritual if you have your birth name and you live with that for the rest of your life. I know plenty of people who have a spirit name and they choose to keep it private and they share it with their immediate circle and people know and maybe call them that, but they don't legally change it or, go by that publicly. But for me, one of the deals that I made was to live this life publicly, to live as an example of what is possible when you remember how to liberate yourself. And so that was part of my job, was to not just go through it, but to go through it with people watching in real time. So making the claim actually was kind of exciting. By the time I got to it, I was like, yeah, Andrew was amazing, but he also came with a whole sack of limitations that just aren't relevant anymore. So in a very human experience of how we present ourselves and what people perceive, it also signified a break from that history and from that past and moving into a new experience. So yeah, it's just one of those things, another rung on this amazing spiral ladder we're all on.
Yeah, yeah. And, many native cultures have as a rite of passage, you receive a new name as you, whether it's enter into adulthood or, possibly in tribal times, make your first kill or, feed the tribe, things like that. And I feel like it is a rite of passage and in this opening, and to take that on, to receive it is a huge service and not always easy either.
No.
What I found is that like it also, it's not, I want to also presence, it's not a rejection of the old you, it's an integration and a choosing to hold that and more
Yes.
and service.
Yes.
A lot of people from my past have said, why did you reject, who you used to be and take a new name? Like, well, that's not how I see it at all. It's an integration. That part served its purpose and still does. That's still part of me. And I've received more and stepped into a greater purpose than I was in when I went by that name.
Bingo. Yeah, I just see it as the wave returning to the ocean, right? Andrew is part of a much, much larger story, and the ocean never rejects the wave. It always just says, yeah, come on home. So that's what it felt like to me, was just moving into what I and who I have always been and claiming that.
Yeah, absolutely. Love it. Thank you for sharing about that, because I think that that's meaningful to people. I know I've had people who found out that Waxela is not my birth name, write me, and email me and say, you should never share your spiritual name. That's yours. It should be private. And I'm like, well, that might be true for you, but I made a commitment to be public and this is what I needed to do, so there are these
Absolutely.
ideas out there that you're not supposed, which, everybody has their ideas, but everybody also, I like that you said, it was for you, this was part of your path.
Yeah,
And we get to respect where anybody is on their path at any given time and how they choose to be called, right?
absolutely.
Since we have a little bit more time, I want to say I heard, I don't know if it was a reel or a video you put out the other day. I think it was on YouTube, where you were talking about judgment versus discernment. And when I heard it, it was just like a minute or something like, oh, yes, I love the way you described that. Would you be willing to share about that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think discernment is one of those words that we talk a lot about, especially in these circles, and especially as you move into that journey of sovereignty and reclaiming your authority. Discernment is something we talk a lot about, right? Discern if that's right, discern the feeling, discern how that feels for you. And I think that it's one of those words that often loses meaning because we've heard it so often. So for me, the difference is judgment is a denial of something. Judgment is saying, trying to eradicate it, push it away, say it doesn't, or to elevate myself above it, right? So judgment to me is saying that's a bad movie. That's a bad movie. That movie should not exist. That's a horrible, awful movie. Discernment is that movie's not for me. I'm not interested in that movie. Anyone can watch it if they want to, but the content, the vibe, the energy, whatever, it's just not my thing. And so I'm just not going to pay attention to it. So discernment for me shows me, is this correct for me? Is this right for me? Does this vibe and gel with how I feel and what I know and how I move through the world? A judgment is a denial of something, almost to say, well, that doesn't exist. I want to eradicate it. And we all know, if you want to make something bigger, try to push it away, right? You go to the gym, you want bigger muscles, you push things away from you. So judgment, I think, actually ties you to it at that energy level. My guides, my team used to say all the time, when you curse something, you claim it. When you love it, you set it free. So to me, judgment is cursing it, saying, no, that shouldn't exist. That didn't happen. That's awful, horrible, evil. Maybe. But why is it up to you to try to eradicate that? Discernment is loving it in a sense of unconditional love, that it's allowed to be as an aspect of all that is, but it is not for me. So I'm going to go over here and I'm going to work on building the things that I do want, that are interesting and that are exciting. So I think it's powerful to acknowledge something, let it be there, and then decide what it means for you. And to me, that's what discernment is.
Perfect. I love how you shared that to curse it is to claim it, to love it is to set it free. How that's just a wonderful way to grasp that concept. And no, we don't want to claim things that we don't want to claim.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
And you claim it at that level. So when you're judging someone for being a certain way, the only way you can judge someone is to be at that level with them. So energetically, you are matching the thing that you are judging, because there's no other way you could perceive it unless you were already there. So you essentially stick yourself at that level energetically when you judge something, when you curse it. So to claim it and say, nope, this isn't for me, set it aside. And that's what liberates you.
Yeah. Yeah. And you also keep experiencing the things that you give attention to. So it's like, which thing do you want to put your attention on?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a simple question.
Yes.
But easier said than done often.
Yeah. It's like everything, it's the practice. We get to
Exactly.
practice. Yeah. Yeah. And nobody's expected to get it right the first time.
No, that's why we have, as many lifetimes as we need to figure it out.
Yes. Some people won't like to hear that. Like, no,
Yeah,
no,
I
no,
know,
no.
but all roads lead to the top of the mountain, so you'll get there eventually.
Yes, indeed. Indeed. Amar, this has been so much fun. Time flies when you're having a great
Does.
conversation. I want to
Yeah.
make sure we tell people about, first of all, you have a free gift, which is a meditation. Tell us
Yes.
about that and how do
So
they get
people
it?
can go to my website, amar.energy, and they just sign up for my newsletter, and then you'll automatically get a welcome newsletter from me that will have a link to download the free guided meditation MP3. And that's the free gift that I have available to everyone. And that never expires. You can go to my website at any time, sign up for the newsletter, and you'll get that little gift in your inbox.
Awesome. Thank you for that. And I'll, of course, have the link in the show notes. We have just a couple minutes left. Are there any final thoughts that you'd like to share before we close?
Yeah, I think that it's so easy. When I remember when I was, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, when I was on the other side of what I've gone through. And it was so often something that I thought, like, how do you get there? Like, this just seems impossible. And I would see people sharing about their freedom and talking about their success and their life that just felt like paradise. And it always seemed like such a foreign concept. And I think it often felt depressing of like, oh, well, that's not for me. I'll just never get there. I don't know how. What I know is this: all that is happening on the journey of spirituality or healing or whatever is you just returning to what you always have been. to what you already are. So while there are moments of like, holy crap, this is deep or heavy or intense, it's just another layer of you. So everything that you experience and everything you meet on the path is something that you've already agreed to. It's already something that you understand on an innate level. And really, it's just about getting your human to the point where it begins to understand and accept it too. So it's not exclusive. It's not only for people who have a certain amount of money or can afford things. I have hundreds and hundreds of hours of free content on my YouTube channel. There is all sorts of information out there. There are books everywhere. If you can't afford it, you go to the library and check it out. There is always a way. So really the prayer is in the beginning is, Spirit, just help me remember what I already am. Show me the path to return and I'll walk it. And all you have to do is begin. Curiosity and willingness are the only two things you need to begin this journey. And those things are free. And all you have to do is be willing. And you don't have to know how, you don't have to know when, you just have to show up and say, okay, Spirit, I'm ready. And she will begin to open the door. The trick is, you have to be willing to walk through it. So I know it's scary. I know it feels daunting and overwhelming, but trust me, I am living proof that it is possible to recreate yourself in the vision that you have. And it doesn't happen overnight, and it does require commitment and dedication, but it happens. And 10 years are going to pass no matter what. Time is going to go by regardless of whether or not you commit to yourself. So why not do it now rather than look back and go, I knew when I heard 5 years ago, Amar and Waxela talking that I should have done it, right? You'll come to it in your own time, but it's nothing to be afraid of. It's just you.
Yes, beautiful. And yeah, everybody check out Amar's YouTube. You really do have a wonderful way of sharing. I love the way you break things down. I mean, anybody that heard you today has kind of got a sense of who you are and the way that you share. So it's Amar Energy, right?
Yeah, they can find me on YouTube, Amar Energy. I also have a podcast, The Luminous, which is on all streaming platforms, but I post the episodes on my YouTube channel as well. So there's years, it's almost 10 years that I've been pouring myself into that YouTube channel. So there is plenty of content, and it was happening in real time. The receipts of my journey are there because I started from almost day one recording videos of like, I don't know what's happening, but I just have to get out there and talk. So if you committed to watching every single video, you would probably complete your spiritual journey in much less time than I did. So it's there if people are willing to dive in and receive it.
Awesome. Thanks for your vulnerability and just your willingness to put it all out there and share what comes up. And I love that, you're willing to share your process of evolving with the world, and what a gift that is. So Amar, thank you for being here. Thank you for your radiance, for all you do for humanity. I appreciate you so much.
Thank you. I had a blast. And thank you for having me back. It was a joy.
Yeah, my pleasure. And for everyone watching, be sure to check out all of Amar's gifts and offers. I'll have his links in the show notes. Have a wonderful day or evening wherever you are. Namaste.
Thanks, Waxela.